2 days to go until the Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana tables his revised budget. Final approval is due from Cabinet today. However, no clear avenues exist for the National Treasury to raise its revenue. Our business reporter Ntokozo Khumalo is now joining us again for her daily budget explainer. So 2 days left. We just spoke to Velinkosi Nihlabisa, the leader of the IFP. He did indicate that they are still negotiating.
Which is really concerning, Aldrin, because we're negotiating with the minister set to table on Wednesday. Cabinet is meant to make that decision by the end of the day, whether they do approve the budget or not. Most economists that I've been speaking to over the last 2 weeks saying South Africa cannot afford another postponement. All eyes on the budgets, including our potential investors. That VAT issue being the sticking issue, and now the news that we heard over the weekend is that it might be back on the table, but a smaller increase as opposed to that 2 percentage points. Now on the table, we're hearing the number 0.75 percentage points, which is still a significant number when you consider just how cash-strapped really South Africans are. But in an interview that the Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana did have with our colleague Mgambi, he did explain, the challenges that really he's faced in finding that balancing act for this budget. Issues of ensuring that you balance, not penalizing the poor too much, but also not penalizing the tax base too much. And not just personal tax, but corporate tax as well. Miners, manufacturers, all under pressure, struggling to keep their heads out of water, as we saw with those Q4 GDP numbers. So really the question is, where are we going to get the money to fund all the country's needs, especially after, President Cyril Ramaphosa basically referred to the SRD then as a normal grant that South Africans need to survive. And the challenge there, needing money to then finance that to ensure that we don't have, increased unemployment that further weighs on the budget. Our high debt levels, making it hard for us to quickly be able to attract money. But I'd like to play a bite by the Finance Minister, because I think over the 2 weeks, what we've really been unpacking is that no matter how you try to work the budget, Aldrin, even if it's your personal budget, if the money is not there, it's hard to work it, and it's hard to know what to take away from. You can't take away from paying your debts, because that puts you in a harder position. The wage bill, already a 3-year negotiation there, so there's not much that we can do there. Already over 36 billion rand a year that's budgeted for the social relief distress grants for the 2026-27 financial year, just under 463 million budgeted in. That already gives us an insight into the kind of deficit we are likely to see over the next 3-4 years. So that's sort of the trickle effect of the issues that we are facing with this budget, that while we might be able to close the hole if the Finance Minister or, the GNU gets to that agreement and they approve that budget and we somehow close the hole for this year, we still have a deficit to deal with the next year and the next year and the next year. So let's hear what Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana says the country needs to do as a matter of urgency to be able to balance those books.
The major problem you face as a nation is a growth problem. So for as long as the economy is not growing, we're going to face these challenges. Let me just give you an example. If we are talking about
even
debt
in his
to
answers
GDP,
to Kholi, it's like one sentence.
Why people are not worried about Italy, are not worried about Japan, and so on. Because no one is worried about those countries' debt to GDP is more than 100%. Because those economies are growing at a pace in which they can afford to service their debt. So our major problem is a growth one. So part of what we're trying to achieve, we should be striving for, is a growth issue. What we were tabling last time on the 19th was precisely to deal with issues using structural reforms and also investing more on infrastructure. In fact, if you read that speech, it's going to tell you we're saying, in fact, economic classification was the fastest growing over the medium term at 8.9%. So not only were we funding the poor, we're also funding infrastructure to invest in growth. And that's why we had this point of having 8.9% growth over the medium term. Without that investment in growth, we are going to have a challenge.
So, Aldrin, a lot still on the table to be worked through when it comes to this budget. We will be unpacking whether we do get that 0.75 percentage points, what it would mean for the grocery basket for South Africans, the very South Africans that the minister says the Balancing Act is about ensuring that they are protected and not pushed further into poverty. But if we do get that VAT increase to try and raise those revenues, we'll be exploring then what exactly that would mean for South African citizens. But we wait to see until the end of the day whether Cabinet does reach a consensus and whether Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana will then table that budget on Wednesday.
Yeah, also wonder what's going to happen to the VAT-exempted basket, whether that is going to increase as well, if that VAT comes lower than that 2 percentage points that was proposed initially. Thank you so much. Ntokozo Khumalo there on the business budget explainer ahead of the Finance Minister's budget speech, which will be delivered on Wednesday.